let's head to the plains of Auburn. I want to talk some Auburn recruiting. Auburn versus Arkansas. The Tigers lose 24-14 at home in front of some big-time recruits. Wide receiver Caleb Cunningham, who's committed to Alabama, was there. Deuce Knight was there. Shamar No. The list goes on. And Auburn, Steve, did Auburn choke? I mean, was this a choke? I mean, what is going on with Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers right now?
Well, did they throw 4 more interceptions today?
Yeah.
So if you're Deuce Knight, you're thinking, hey, again, I got an opportunity to come in here year one and compete with these guys and get on the field and play with some young, talented wide receivers.
You're hoping he says
certainly,
that, right? You're
exactly
hoping.
Right. Certainly, that's what Auburn's selling, right? And that's
but he might not. I mean, that might not be what Deuce Knight's seeing, because he's been to 3 home games now, and maybe Deuce Knight's thinking, well, am I next? Meaning, am I going to be the one that's throwing 4 picks next?
Well, I don't think any quarterback thinks they're going to be the one that's throwing picks, but he's going to be back at Auburn again next weekend for his official visit. At least that's the plan. So that would be 4 visits to Auburn this fall, plus Big Cat weekend. Talking to people that have spent time with him, he sees a need, and then obviously I think he's put feelers out to other elite players on if they would join him at Auburn. Now, will he ultimately go to Auburn? Time will tell. He's committed to Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's trying to get him back for the Stanford game. And I think he also could look at Notre Dame and see an opportunity to make an instant impact there. Certainly they got CJ Carr there, and there's a lot of excitement around the true freshman quarterback that got a chance to get into the game against Purdue 2 weekends ago. But that job's going to be open at Notre Dame next year. Riley Leonard's a 1-year rental. And but Caleb Cunningham talked with Auburn Live, talked with Cole Pinkston, said that Deuce is recruiting him to Auburn, and that if he went to, Auburn doesn't have that quarterback that Caleb Cunningham is looking for right now. He's committed to Alabama, thinks Keelan Russell is a great player. That's in addition to just Jamarcus Shepard being a fantastic wide receivers coach and his track record, and Kalen DeBoer in general. But he told our Auburn staff and Cole Pinkston that if Deuce Knight went to Auburn, that it could help the Tigers' chances. But the biggest takeaway from that is Deuce Knight is recruiting Caleb Cunningham to Auburn. And I think he's had some dialogue with 5-star offensive tackle Andrew Babalola as well, in addition to many of the other recruits that were on campus earlier in the season. Naeem Offord, 5-star corner committed to Ohio State, and his family. They've had dialogue with Deuce Knight and his family about Auburn. So certainly, at the very least, Deuce Knight is keeping Auburn very warm and thinking and gathering information on what his future would look like there with what players. I think he still has a lot of love for Notre Dame. I think he's tight with Burris, Plaxico Burris' son, who's committed to Notre Dame. I think they got a good relationship. Obviously, I think his conversations with Notre Dame have been status quo with Marcus Freeman, Gino Godolgi. Look, Notre Dame's trying to get him back up for the Louisville game next weekend. I think he's going to Auburn for his official visit, but if he showed up at Louisville for the Notre Dame Louisville game, that would completely turn this recruitment on its head, right? But he hasn't committed to Auburn. There's been some talk behind the scenes that there were some dates that have come and passed.
Yep.
So, and I think Auburn's having dialogue with other quarterbacks just in case they miss on Deuce Knight, because that's what they got to do, right? I mean, you can't just put all your eggs in one basket. Deuce Knight's the top target on the board. I think that's pretty obvious. But there's other really good quarterbacks out there that could also be a potential impact player for Hugh Freeze and the Tigers.
Yeah, and we saw Shamar Arnaud show up. Shamar Arnaud out of the state of Georgia, Carrollton, Georgia, cornerback committed to USC. Was he a guy, or is he still a guy that you think that Auburn can flip?
Absolutely. I mean, I think he thought the defensive backs played well, and that Coach Crime and Coach Charles Kelly do a good job of developing defensive backs. And Auburn's defense is playing well early on in the season and in all these games. It's the offense that keeps giving the ball away that's really been their Achilles heel right now. And I went and spent some time at Auburn last week, and Hugh Freeze talked about, hey, maybe I should have gone in the portal hindsight being 2020, he didn't, those were my words there on the hindsight,
Yeah.
not his, but he wanted to allocate those funds to other places to get this roster where he wanted it holistically. I don't think he anticipated all these turnovers this year. Obviously he didn't. And now it's a struggle for who to put out there under center from week to week. We've seen some quarterback musical chairs at Auburn. That's not where you want to be 4 games into the season. But Auburn signed a top 10 class last year. They're tracking for a top 10 class this year, and they're tracking for a top 10 class in 2026. So if the recruits continue to buy in, there's no question there's an infusion of talent coming Auburn's way. They just might have to navigate an up and down season. And today was a down in a very winnable SEC game. And they really, it's the offense that has to look at themselves in the mirror and say, why do we continue to sputter and turn the football over?
Yeah. Arkansas comes to the Plains, wins 24-14, but it didn't really feel that close, but it's a 24-14 victory for Arkansas. And, we're starting to see Auburn has 2 losses at home. I asked you last week, can Auburn continue to lose and still maintain a top 10 class? Could they sign a top 5 class? I mean, prior to the season starting, when Auburn was super hot in August, we were talking that Auburn had a shot at the number 1 class in America. Now, when I was saying that, I didn't factor in that they would have 2 early losses at home and staring down a really tough SEC schedule ahead. So I'm going to ask you again, at what point does this class start to fall apart, or does Hugh Freeze just get a free pass because it's year 2?
Well, I think that anytime you're struggling on the field, at any point, the rails could come off on the recruiting trail. We're not seeing any sign of that just yet with Auburn. There's no chinks in the armor. There's no decommitments. There's no buzz behind the scenes that they're starting to fade with top targets. See Darian Morgan, arguably the top prospect in the 2026 class. When he talked to Cole Pinkston after the game, he was saying "we" in referencing Auburn. He's not committed. Auburn's trending for him. Auburn's crushing in-state recruiting right now, doing a fantastic job since Hugh Freeze and company have got there, prioritizing their top targets in-state. So no chinks in the armor just yet, Josh, but it's not getting easier. Oklahoma, we just talked about them in the last segment. They didn't play the way they wanted to play tonight for 4 quarters against Tennessee, but their defense played phenomenal against arguably the top offense in the country, shaving about 300 yards off what Tennessee's accustomed to gaining in a ball game. So it's not going to be easier for this Auburn offense to come in against the Oklahoma team that's going to be very hungry for a big SEC win coming off a tough home loss in prime time. And then you got Georgia and Missouri coming after that. So it's, a little bit of a murderer's row. Now,
a little bit.
Look, I mean, Missouri had to survive Vanderbilt this week. Like, every week is tough. Like, just win, baby, right? I'm not mad at anyone that walks out of any stadium with the win these days, no matter who the opponent is. And Missouri's 4-0 right now. I'm just saying, like, there are some winnable games on the schedule for Auburn, but Arkansas was one that I probably would have circled in the preseason and said, hey, they got to have that one to be postseason bound.
Without a doubt. And I just think that, last week there was very little concern over Auburn's record and the way that they were playing. But I'm telling you, I think if they continue to play this way and they continue to look this way, and I know they're going to get some wins, it's not going to be as ugly as it was today. But, if they continue to play this way, I think guys are going to start to question Hugh Freeze's direction, just the general direction of the program, the value that the program can bring to them, the development that they're seeing on the field. I think those things, I think that this Auburn team is dangerously close to losing a couple more games that could sway some recruits' opinions. As of now, everything feels good. Everything seems good. They're still getting guys back on campus. Like you said, Deuce Knight's going to come back again. But I'm telling you, if Auburn wins these 2 games at home, I think Deuce Knight has already flipped. I'm not saying, I just think you and I have been around recruiting enough. We know what it's like in the locker room after a win. We know the pressure a coaching staff can put on a recruit after a win. You can't really do those things after a loss. I know some teams don't even allow recruits in the locker room after a loss. So there is none of that camaraderie. There is none of that chance to put the recruit on the spot and let him commit in front of the entire team. That's kind of how it goes down post game after a win. Auburn hasn't had that with Deuce Knight on campus. So we'll see what happens next week. Maybe he shows up. Maybe he ends up at Notre Dame. I know there's some whispers there. Yeah.
One school that we need to always make sure that we keep warm in the Deuce Knight sweepstakes, even though we don't give them a lot of dialogue right now, is Ole Miss.
Okay. What about Mississippi State? Are they a threat at all?
I haven't heard Mississippi State is a factor for Deuce Knight, but I do think that Ole Miss lurks in that. Look, a lot of these recruitments, infrastructure and resources are very relevant. These prospects earn that in their recruitments, and I think that all these programs are lining up their resources and infrastructures for some of these big blue chip battles. And so we'll see how these chips continue to fall. But I think Ole Miss remains in the conversation for Deuce Knight as well. They're not a team that is hot right now, or they're not getting much buzz. And certainly he's visiting Auburn every weekend. He was at Southern Miss last weekend, caught the game down in Hattiesburg, but back at Auburn this weekend, going to be back at Auburn next weekend. The intel still favors Auburn, but it's not like it's, there's other programs involved. He's committed to Notre Dame, and Ole Miss is there too. So Auburn's not just standing right next to the hoop and banking it in off the square right now.
No, they're not. And, they're trying to kick the tires on Luke Nickel, who's committed to Miami. We don't know if they'll circle back on Julian Lewis, who's committed to USC. So you can tell that even the Auburn staff isn't 100% sure that Deuce Knight is going to flip. I would say back in August, now we're almost out of September. Back in August, I think everybody felt it was a if not when scenario with Deuce Knight flipping, and now maybe a little bit murkier.
I think the general vibe is that around Auburn sources is that he's going to end up at Auburn, but we've all been around recruiting. They've all been around recruiting. So we'll see what Deuce Knight's first time through, man, so he's doing the best he can. And he did not have the high school junior year that he wanted to have, went through a bad high school transfer, transferred back home. So I think that this is a young man in a family that wants to be absolutely sure when they make a final decision on the process, because they've already had some ups and downs with some decisions that they've made in his high school career that didn't go the way that they drew it up. And obviously you control what you can control, but Deuce Knight's in a position where he doesn't have to make a final decision right away. Notre Dame would still love to have him. Obviously Auburn would love to have him. You got Ole Miss out there, and who knows if other schools don't come involved in the Deuce Knight sweepstakes as the season gets played out here.
Yeah. All right. Auburn fans, talk to us. Let us know. How are you guys feeling right now about recruiting? Do you still think that the Deuce Knight flip is going to happen? What about Caleb Cunningham? He was on campus. Obviously, Auburn could use a big-time playmaker. Caleb Cunningham committed to Alabama, but can the Tigers flip him? Let us know. Talk to us, comment section below.